Hello, Worldcist 2020. We are from Corporación Universitaria Americana in Medellín, Colombia. Our presentation is Learning Patterns Identification as a Strategy for Digital Appropriation Skills in Fresher University Students. The team is David Alberto García Arango, Gloria Cecilia Agudelo Alzate, Oscar Andrés Cuéllar Rojas, Jorge Eliecer Villarreal Fernández, and César Felipe Henao Villa. Welcome. Okay, in first place is necessary an overview of the topic. The incursion of digital technologies in productive process led to ways of thinking reconfiguration about learning and teaching. This can be possible by reconstructing the concept of skills in education and reviewing the challenge that we must face in a context determined by the so-called knowledge society. Content overcrowding, development of new ways of knowing, and exponential growth of data and information are changing perspectives regarding the desirable skills for citizens, those essentials for the modern professional who intends to be successful in the future. Such skills can be seen in more detail in 1. Some projects orient towards the identification of these skills can be studied more around, and that can be categorized as ways of thinking, ways of working, tools for working, living together in the world. Besides, the UNESCO's purpose towards learning to know, learn to do, learn to be, and learn to live together. Additionally, the OECD associates these skills with the purpose of interacting in heterogeneous groups, using tools interactively, acting autonomously, relates the 21st century skills with learning and innovation, media and technology, life and career, and finally, it's possible to consider the aspect of learning to learn as a fundamental. Learning to learn is a fundamental skill. In line with this, with that I saying, this article exposes development of the identification of learning patterns through the application of the questionnaire proposed by Vermont. The Vermont questionnaire is a diagnostic of the development of skills in appropriation of digital technologies in fresher university students. Okay, now we can talk about research context. The 21st century skills proposed by the ATC 21 project are divided into 4 categories, like it's possible to say, ways of thinking, ways of living in the world, ways of working, tools for working, with subcategories promoting the integral development for students, as we can see in table 1. For this research, there is a special interest in the work tools category and the consequent subcategory of appropriation of digital technologies. This is possible to be defined as ability to explore, create, communicate, and detect technologies as tools. From this definition, it is interpreted that the basis of this skill is the ability to explore, create, communicate, and produce in other environments mediated by digital technologies. This basis needed for appropriation of digital technologies can be observed too in a review study carried out by Rodriguez Garcia, Romero Rodriguez, and Campos Soto. They say that despite of abilities that digital natives present with respect to technologies, their digital competence can be inferior to that of digital migrants. The author manifests the necessity to attain conditions like producing digital content based in learning and creativity skills. Going deeper into the concept of digital skills, the one proposed by the National Institute of Educational Technologies and Teacher Training, and according to the common framework of digital teaching skills, based on European guidelines, they define digital skills as the creative, critical, and safe use of information and communication technologies to achieve objectives related to work, employability, learning, leisure time, inclusion, and participation in society. In this matter, it was proposed to identify learning patterns as a way of approaching teaching of digital skills appropriation, and this was possible by using Vermont's Learning Styles Inventory of ELS, which consists of questions distributed in 4 domains of dimensions related to learning. The combination of these patterns in 4 different complexity levels make possible to characterize the so-called learning patterns, which are selected as a coherent set of learning activities that students usually use. Their beliefs about learning and their motivation for learning, a set which is characteristic of them in a certain period of time. The questionnaire in mention inquires about learning conceptions, motivational orientations about learning, learning regulation strategies, and learning processing strategies in students. The combination of these levels of appropriation is in each orientation generates a different learning pattern, as could be seen in Table 2. We can see domain and learning patterns as some domain mental models of learning, learning orientation, regulation strategies, and processing strategies. Some domain is or are meaning direct, reproduction direct, application direct, and indirect. The combination of these domain and learning patterns can say more about the learning patterns of our students in fresher courses. Okay, the methodology. About the methodology, the study was mixed and cross-sectional, demarcated by a pragmatic paradigmatic level. In this sense, results and theories that are adjusted to each other give as result the case being analyzed. The data collection instrument has been applied to 2006 high school students. The instrument was Inventory Learning Styles, developed by Vermont and translated into Spanish by Martinez Fernández. The population selected is in the José María Bernal Educational Institution in the municipality of Caldas of Departamento of Antioquia, Colombia. The institution has more than 3,000 students distributed in 3 locations: elementary, secondary, and vocational media levels. The context of the research takes place in a urban area where the families of the students are on medium-low income. The institution, being of public type, is regulated by the guidelines defined by Educational Secretary of Ministry of National Education. The data was created by using the SPSS software. In this way, as a first stage, a factor analysis was applied with the method of extraction of principal components with the respective KMO and Bartlett's sphericity test. In a second stage, the regression values generated from the extraction by components were stored in order to make a hierarchical cluster analysis with linking groups method and is necessary to measure of square Euclidean distance. In a third stage, scatter plots were generated in order to compare the regressions obtained in the first stage and to identify how the clusters obtained in the second stage are distributed. As a fourth and last stage, the results obtained were analyzed in order to generate research conclusions identifying relationships patterns that affect the teaching of digital technologies appropriation skills. Okay, the first stage in results and analysis, we have the factor analysis, the characteristics related to the meaning direct learning pattern were chosen, whose subcategories in each domain are construction of knowledge, personally interested, self-regulation. In self-regulation, we can see learning process, results, and learning content, and the deep processing relating, structuring, and critical. The mentioned characteristics are complementary and define a group of behaviors oriented towards significant learning. The values obtained in the matrix of principal components are presented in this presentation. We had in the presentation the component matrix. One component for this mental model of learning, the construction of knowledge. We have two components in learning orientations at personally interested, note how motivation characteristics for table 4 is subdivided into two components. Each component is identified with a group of questions that can be interpreted in order to build categories. Regressions called component 3A and component 3B can be interpreted as the components obtained from the characteristics related to motivation for personal interest that does not depend of knowledge type and motivation for personal interest that does depend of the type of knowledge respectively. Next, we can see at table 5 and table 6 that we have one component respectively. The table 5 talks about self-regulation. Yeah, table 6 talk about deep processing. So we can note that how the motivation characteristics for table 4 um, is subdivided in two components and the others in one component. Okay. In stage 2, we can see clustering based on regressions of main components results in three groups that, according to the ANOVA test, are independent. The table 7 shows the results of cluster independence obtained from component 1, as we can see, learning through deep processing is component 1. Component 2, that is meaning is self-regulation of learning. The component 3A that talks about motivation for personal interest independent of the type of knowledge. The component 3B is about motivation for personal interest depending of type of knowledge. And component 4 that talks about knowledge as construction of learning. Next, in the third stage, we can see some graphs. The graphs are generated in order to link the results of stages 1 and 2. For each graph, the clusters are represented by circles with different colors, like blue, green, and brown, and their respective numbers 1, 2, and 3. The horizontal and vertical lines represent the average value on each axis, forming quadrants that allow to classify the sample according to its grouping tendency. The higher the points are, the higher values in the vertical axis component. On the other hand, the more to the right are the points, it is assumed that they have higher values in the horizontal axis component. So, as we can see, the self-regulation and deep processing has a relationship, an interesting relationship, like linear relationship, and we can see a group, the green group, is primarily the better group. In construction of knowledge and deep processing, we cannot see a relation. It is disorderly. We have a disorder. In self-regulation and construction of knowledge, we can see disorder too. In deep processing and personally interested in general knowledge, we can see a disorder too. There is no relation. And next, in the other two, we can see no relation. Maybe in the final, this graph of construction of knowledge and personally interested in general knowledge, maybe in this graph we can see that there is a relation, a linear relation. It is possible, but we have to study more about this relationship in these dimensions. The next two, in depth processing, personally interested in specific knowledge, we have Uh, we have a disorder. There is no relationship. And if we are studying self-regulation and personally interested in specific knowledge, maybe there is we can see a linear relation. It's possible too. So, the main idea was to study the relationship in the pattern, in the knowledge patterns in the students. So we had the next conclusions. The results allow to identify three groups where one of them has greater affinity in relation to learning patterns directed at meaning. This group also has a better performance at digital technology appropriation skills. There is a dependency in the sample studied between a deep learning processing, which is elaborated, structured, and critical, and self-regulation of learning. Therefore, a self-regulation student in the learning will be more likely to have elaborated, structured, and critical processing capabilities. This is the first conclusion. In the second time, in the second conclusion, uh, there is a dependency between the interest in knowledge and the perception that the student has about knowledge. The greater interest in knowledge, the more critical and reflective is the way in which the student conceives knowledge. It's possible that a future research study is related to conducting this research longitudinally, identifying changes in the combinatorial learning patterns every time that significant experiences with digital technologies are generated. Using this, it is possible to introduce curricular adaptations that allow an improvement in the learning pattern that could show if the green group becomes more numerous. This line of research is also proposed by Vermont and Donche. That was the second conclusion. And the third conclusion, the last one, conclusion, is about learning pattern identification. The sample used are senior high school students who mostly have a learning pattern aimed at meaning, which is related to the competency of appropriation of digital technology. In this sense, a learning pattern aimed at meaning uh, can generate the conditions to the structured and critical elaboration of knowledge, as well as for the self-regulation of processes and contents in education. It's necessary that the university curricular management uh, directed should consider the identification of prevalence of this learning pattern and is necessary to be based on it in order to implement curricular intervention policies in fresher university students. Okay, and last, the references. We have the references. The main references is the Vermont and Donce about learning patterns perspective. They talk the questionnaire. It's important to use the questionnaire to students, and it's important to to know about the patterns, the learning patterns of our students. Okay, thank you so much. Gracias totales. If you have questions, you can email me at dagarcia @coruniamericana.edu.co. Thank you so much.